ever been burned off, by like a broken promise.
Yeah.
And it's not just annoying, right? It turns out those little flakes, those broken promises, actually have a huge hidden cost.
Yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today, this fascinating world of persuasion.
Right.
And we're pulling from this really interesting book called The Small Big, right?
Yes.
All about the impact, get this, of tiny changes.
Tiny but mighty.
Exactly. For example, did you know that the British healthcare system loses billions with a B every year just from missed appointments?
Billions. It's astounding, isn't it?
It's mind-blowing. So it's such a perfect example of these small things that can snowball into these huge problems.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? Because it really speaks to the psychology of commitment.
Yeah.
And, we often just assume, oh, people are just flaky.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a deeper psychological reason at play here.
So it's more than just, people forgetting to put it in their calendar.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell me more.
Think about it this way. We're far more likely to follow through when we've actively made a promise, as opposed to just passively agreeing to something.
So is it the difference between someone saying, yeah, I'll get to that, versus actually looking you in the eye and saying, I promise I will do it?
Precisely. That's a great way to put it.
Okay. Because that makes sense to me, but do we have research to back that up?
Oh, absolutely. There was this fascinating study. Researchers staged a fake theft on a beach.
Okay.
Now, some beachgoers were just kind of sunbathing nearby, right?
Just hanging out.
But others were specifically asked by the researcher to watch their belongings.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so they made that commitment to watch the stuff.
Gotcha.
And guess what happened?
I'm guessing the people that made the promise were much more likely to jump in and stop the thief.
You got it. That's exactly it. Those who had verbally committed, they felt a sense of responsibility that the others just didn't have. Active commitment was key.
Wow.
To unlocking that follow-through.
Okay. So how do we take this beach experiment and put it into, let's say, like a work setting? Because I'm thinking about all those meetings that end with these vague agreements.
Right.
No real action plan. What do we do?
It's all about turning that passive agreement into active commitment.
Okay.
So imagine, instead of that vague ending, you end a meeting with a really clear recap. Everyone verbally confirms their tasks. They're not just nodding along. They're owning that to-do list.
Or how about, like, even with my kids, getting them to promise one more story before bed?
That's a great one, yeah.
That feels like a game changer in my house. Active commitment.
Now, even with a promise, we all know procrastination can creep in.
Oh, yeah.
But here's a counterintuitive thought.
Yeah.
Shorter deadlines often lead to more action than these long, drawn-out ones.
Really?
Yes.
That feels so backwards, because don't we want more time to get things done?
Logically, yes. But our brains don't always operate on logic alone.
Right.
There was this study done with gift cards, and some had a longer expiration date, others had a much shorter one.
Okay.
So naturally, you would think people would use the ones with more time first, right?
Yeah, of course, more time, more options.
Exactly. That's what you'd think.
What happened?
The ones with the shorter deadline, they created this sense of urgency, and those are the ones that actually got used more.
No way.
Yes.
Wow. So it's like that thing where if you give someone like weeks to get back to you with a decision versus saying, I need an answer by this date, it actually might work in your favor to encourage action.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even that trip, with friends who are always saying they're too busy, maybe make it a date that's a little closer,
right,
and suddenly they're free.
A little urgency can be a powerful motivator.
It's all about that subtle shift.
Absolutely.
Wow. That is fascinating. A tiny tweak with huge impact.
I love it. It's interesting how we often overlook something else when we're talking about influence.
Okay.
And that's the power of what we wear.
Okay, so we're going beyond just dressing for success now.
We are.
There's got to be more to it.
There's this.
Than just like, putting on a nice outfit.
It's about understanding those subtle cues that clothing sends to our brains.
Okay.
For example, did you know that people in uniforms are far more likely to get compliance from others?
Yeah, that makes sense. But like, I'm not wearing a uniform to work every day. So
Right.
how does that apply?
It's not just about actual uniforms.
Okay.
Studies have shown that even jaywalkers wearing suits can influence others to follow them more than someone dressed casually.
Really?
It's those subtle signals our clothes send.
It's like our brains have this like shortcut
Yes.
where they see certain clothes and they're making these judgments and we don't even realize we're doing it.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
We associate uniforms with authority, with order, right?
Right.
And the suits often signify competence, expertise,
Okay.
and these visual cues
Right.
tap into this really primal part of our brain
Wow.
that responds to these signals.
Oh. So I don't need to go out and buy a police officer's uniform tomorrow.
Right.
But it is about being mindful of the image we're projecting.
Be mindful, dress to connect, but elevate your look just a notch above the situation.
Okay, I like that.
So if it's a casual meeting, maybe opt for a collared shirt instead of a t-shirt.
Okay.
If it's a formal presentation, you might even consider a suit, even if others are going business casual.
Dress for the impact you want to make.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit from wardrobe to words,
Okay.
because I want to talk about this idea of expert framing.
Yes.
And it's this idea that it's not just what you say, it's how you position yourself when you say it.
Yes. It all goes back to those mental shortcuts our brains crave.
Okay.
We're just bombarded with so much information these days
Right.
that our brains rely on these heuristics.
Heuristics.
Yeah, heuristics.
Okay, is that like a fancy word for gut feeling?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay.
There are these mental shortcuts our brains use to process information quickly, efficiently. Okay.
And when it comes to expert opinions, our brains are wired to take notice.
So we're more likely to trust someone we see as an expert.
Exactly.
Interesting.
We accept their opinions as credible, often without even realizing it.
Wow. Okay.
But here's the really fascinating part.
Okay.
Expressing a tiny bit of uncertainty as an expert can actually be more persuasive than unwavering confidence.
Really? That's so interesting because wouldn't we want the expert to be totally sure?
Right. Right. You would think so.
Yeah.
But think about it this way.
Okay.
Perfection can breed suspicion.
Yeah.
Let's say you're reading a restaurant review.
Okay.
Which statement feels more authentic? This restaurant is, without a doubt, the absolute best in the city.
Okay.
Or, I've only dined here once, so I can't say for certain, but based on my experience, it's a strong contender for the best in the city.
I mean, the second one feels a little more human.
Exactly.
You're really thinking about it, you know?
It's about finding that sweet spot between confident expertise
Right.
and this relatable humility. Okay.
People are more likely to trust someone who acknowledges the limits of their knowledge
Yeah.
while still offering valuable insights.
Be an expert, but also be a human.
Precisely.
Okay, so when it comes to this expert framing, are there like practical things that people listening can use
Absolutely.
in
Absolutely.
their own lives?
First, establish your expertise early on.
Okay.
So this could be as simple as saying, I've been researching this extensively,
All
or in my experience, right?
right.
Secondly, don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable.
Okay.
A touch of uncertainty can actually boost your credibility.
So instead of saying, this is the only way to do it,
Right.
you might say, this has worked really well for me, but I'm open to other ideas.
Exactly. And then finally, always be authentic.
Right.
People can spot a phony a mile away,
Oh, yeah.
right?
They can smell it.
You got to be real, you got to be genuine,
Yeah.
and that's going to come through.
That is such great advice for, navigating all the situations where we want to be seen as knowledgeable, we want to be trustworthy,
Yes.
but we don't want to be, the arrogant know-it-all in the room.
Exactly. Find that balance.
Right, yeah. It's funny, isn't it? We think about persuasion as this big dramatic thing,
Right.
but so much of it is these subtle, like almost invisible tactics.
It's true.
It's the little things.
It's the little things that make a big difference, right?
Yeah. And speaking of small moves, big impact.
Yes.
Let's talk negotiations.
Okay.
And before you say, well, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not in sales, hear me out, because we
Uh-huh.
negotiate every single day,
Every day.
whether we realize it or not.
From deciding what's for dinner to a deadline at work.
100%.
Yeah, it's constant.
It's constant. And so there's some fascinating
Yes.
psychology at play that I think can be really empowering for us.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this idea of going first,
Okay.
because it seems so counterintuitive.
It does.
Like the conventional wisdom is hold back.
Right. Don't show your hand.
You let them, kind of put their cards on the table first.
Yeah.
But research has actually found that making the first move, especially when it comes to like an offer, can be surprisingly effective.
It's true.
Really.
Yes.
So just throwing a number out there, even if it feels a little scary,
Yeah.
can work in your favor.
It can, and it all comes down to this psychological principle called anchoring.
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 Okay, tell me more.
So imagine you have a ship, right? And it drops its anchor.
Okay.
That anchor sets a reference point for the ship's position, right?
Okay.
The same thing happens in our brains when we're presented with a number.
Okay.
That first number, it becomes an anchor, reference point
Gotcha.
that influences how we perceive all subsequent numbers.
So if I'm selling something
Yes.
and I start with a higher price, even if I know we're going to go back and forth,
Right.
the buyer's already thinking in that higher range.
Exactly. Because that initial number, it sets a frame
Wow.
for the entire rest of the conversation.
Sneaky.
It influences how they evaluate all the other offers that come after that.
It's like that thing when you go to buy a used car, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's like that sticker price,
Yeah.
even though you know you're not paying that.
Right, but it's there.
It's in your head.
It's an anchor.
It's an anchor. Oh, okay. Wow. This is both brilliant and terrifying.
It is, a little bit.
It makes you realize how, like...
How malleable we are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So how do we make sure that we're not the ones getting anchored when we're on the other side of that?
Preparation is key.
Okay.
So before you go into any important negotiation, take some time to really think it through.
Yeah.
Write down your desired outcome. What are you hoping to get out of this?
Okay.
And the justification behind it. Why is this number important to you?
Okay.
That gives you a clear internal anchor to hold on to.
I love it.
Right.
That's like your little note to self. Don't go below this.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our anchor. We're prepared. What else? What other, like, negotiation ninja moves can we have in our back pocket?
When you do present your offer, be incredibly specific.
Okay.
So instead of saying, this is going to cost around $2,000,
Right.
you say, this is $2,135.
Why does that matter? It seems so small.
Because our brains equate precision with expertise
Oh, interesting.
and thoughtfulness.
Okay.
So that very specific number, even if it's just a few dollars difference,
Right.
it makes you seem more credible and less likely to be lowballed.
So instead of seeming like I'm being annoying and nickel and diming,
Right.
it's like, no, I've thought this through.
This is a well-researched number.
I've done my research. Okay,
Okay.
I like it. I like it.
Small but mighty.
Okay, last thing before we wrap up. All this talk about negotiation, even with these tips.
Yeah.
My heart's racing a little bit. Like,
Sure.
how do we stay calm? How do we stay confident? Especially if you're someone who tends to get a little nervous in these situations.
Absolutely. I love it. This is great.
Okay.
Your body language
Mhm.
can actually be a secret weapon
Okay.
when it comes to confidence.
Okay.
So before a big negotiation, take a few minutes to literally power pose.
Power pose. Is this like a superhero pose?
You got it, like something out of a superhero movie.
Okay.
It might sound silly, but studies have shown
Yeah.
these poses can actually shift your hormone levels.
No way.
Yes.
What?
So stand tall, shoulders back, chin up.
Okay.
Maybe even strike a celebratory pose like you already won.
Okay.
Whatever makes you feel powerful.
So I can just stand like Wonder Woman for 2 minutes
Exactly.
and then walk into the room
Yes.
and I'm going to feel more
You
confident.
might be surprised.
That is wild. Okay.
It increases testosterone,
Okay.
which is linked to confidence, assertiveness,
Okay.
right? And it decreases cortisol, the stress hormone.
No way.
Yes, it's amazing.
Okay, so next time I'm about to, negotiate a raise
Yes.
or even just ask a friend for a favor,
Right.
I'm channeling my inner superhero before I make the ask.
I love it. It's a small tweak
That's amazing.
that can make a world of difference.
It really is. It really is. And I think that's a good place to maybe wrap up our deep dive today
I think so too.
into the power of these tiny tweaks.
The small, big.
The small big,
Yes.
from making those promises more powerful
Yes.
to dressing for the impact we want, to mastering the art of expert framing.
Yes.
These subtle shifts, I mean, it's really incredible
It can make such a difference.
to see how they impact how we interact with the world
Absolutely.
and how the world interacts with us, right?
100%.
So here's the final thought to leave everybody with. If these small tweaks have this big impact on our behavior,
Yeah,
our decisions, then how can we become more aware
that's a great question.
of when these tactics are being used on us?
Yes.
Something to think about.
Absolutely.
Until next time on The Deep Dive.